So you're saying you won the championship last year without even knowing the scoring?
No, that's not true.
It's a third-year league, by the way.
What's going on with the quarter zip today? Is there a shirt underneath that?
Yeah, why?
I'm just wondering. I don't see anything. I see from neck and chest.
This is how One Night in Buffalo started, Jay. Exactly. He suddenly, yeah. I do have a T-shirt on underneath, in case you were wondering.
I'll take your word for it. Yeah.
Deep V.
Deep V.
Deep V Berry.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. I'm Connor Rogers alongside Matthew Berry, Jay Croucher. Matthew, the look's so nice, you brought it back twice.
Different
color, but
different color.
Same
And this one,
undershirt.
that was a quarter zip. This one goes all the way down.
Yeah.
That's right.
No
all the way
undershirt.
down, Jay Croucher.
Yes. We're in Stanford, but we're in Milan at the same time.
Pretty much.
Fashion capital of the world.
Yeah.
Stanford,
Unbelievable.
Connecticut.
Oh, I like it.
I appreciate it.
Very
Thank
nice.
you very much. That's always a highlight for me.
Good to show some
I sure
neck
hope,
and upper chest.
I sure hope my my co-hosts approve of my wardrobe.
Yes. Yeah,
That's
we do.
picked up by a professional.
Yeah.
That's very fair.
Yeah.
All right.
You've had some hits and misses. Just skews more hit.
Let's not run over wardrobe today.
Yeah,
That's what we're going to
exactly.
No, it's not their fault. It's
a
how he
kickoff-
wears it.
Kickoff to the season.
That's
Vibes
all
are at
right.
an all-time high.
I can only work with what I have, and it's not much.
10
be
lists of
honest.
10 today, by the way. We're
Yep.
looking at some of Barry's best lists from one of
It's
our
week
favorite
one, by
draft
the way,
season
boys.
articles. I
It's
said
week
that.
one.
You
Yeah, it's
didn't hear
week
it,
one.
but
Well, Jay was busy insulting my wardrobe, so
Fired
yeah.
up. You're off to
Fired
Kansas,
up.
You're off to
Chiefs,
Kansas
Ravens.
City.
I'm off to Kansas City tomorrow night, Wednesday night.
You off to Sao Paulo after that?
Yes. No, I am not. I'll be back
They
here in
reined that one
Stanford.
in. They said no
But
way.
it's interesting to bring that up. It's a very big week for us here at NBC Sports. Obviously, we'll be doing Fantasy Football Happy Hour throughout the week. Thursday night, the season debut of Sunday Night Football, but it'll be on Thursday night. It's the first game of the season. It is Ravens at Chiefs.
Pretty weak
right here on
matchup.
NBC Sports and Peacock. What?
Pretty weak matchup.
Yeah,
You know,
going
Mahomes,
to be obviously amazing.
watching.
And then Friday night, exclusively on Peacock, it is Packers and Eagles from Brazil. And then Sunday Night Football, Sunday morning, the season debut of Fantasy Football pregame, Jay. You and I and a cast of thousands will get you ready from 11 a.m. to 1 o'clock Eastern on kickoff on Peacock and the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. So we'll do that. And then Sunday Night Football, the actual Sunday Night Football, we got Rams at Lions. Matthew Stafford's once again return, a rematch of the playoffs.
You missed the biggest one of all. Commanders Bucks as
Commanders-
well. The
well,
start
yeah,
of the
but that's
Jane
not
Daniels era.
that's not on an NBC
It's true.
platform here. I'm a company man.
Yeah, it's on NBC in your heart.
Yeah,
It's
there
Jane
you go.
Daniels' debut.
Exactly right. I can't wait. Yeah, the debut of it's Jaden Daniels versus Baker Mayfield.
Yes, the latest chance at a Hall of Famer for the Washington Commanders.
We'll run this one back.
Yeah.
Let's run it back.
Good
Better
Labor Day,
chance than
Matthew?
Sam Howell.
What?
Good Labor Day?
I had a
drive
great
the,
Labor
drive
Day.
the boat safely?
I did. I can use it again. That's
Right.
always the success. That's always the test.
Good enough,
Can
Captain.
you? Yeah, exactly. I'm like a B minus. But
passing
but you know
grade.
what? But like honestly, can you use the boat again? You can. Then it was a successful trip.
You ever crashed?
I have never crashed.
Okay.
I have never crashed. But it was the one thing I will say here, and I posted this on social media. But September 1st, which was Sunday, was the 1-year anniversary of the passing of Jimmy Buffett. And so I'll take a moment here. Parrot heads, we all drink free. We all drink margaritas for free here at the Happy Hour. Bittersweet moment, but I was in Block Island, Rhode Island. Rhode Island is where Jimmy played his very last show. It's where he spent a lot of time, both Block Island specifically, but also Rhode Island. And so it was also where I was last year when I found out. So it's always a family tradition. We go there for the Labor Day weekend show. So anyway, it was bittersweet, but would rather celebrate the man than mourn him. So anyway, parrot heads everywhere. We drink free.
Indeed.
All right, we got our 10
Yeah.
list of 10 here. Part 1, the preseason storylines that, Matthew, you are buying. And number 1, we start off with a bang here. Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels will live up to the hype and more, both delivering on big seasons. And we got to hear from Caleb Williams, who sat down with our very own Maria Taylor on exactly that. We'll get there.
Those dreams and aspirations that I set for myself, because I always set really high aspirations, and that's another dream of mine is to become the greatest. It allows me to keep going, allows me to reach those things. because I know that I can't reach certain things like that in 1 year, 2 years, or anything like that. So it gives me a push.
Lofty goals, Matthew, for Caleb Williams?
Sure.
And lofty expectations, but you're buying in that year one he can reach them.
I don't know that he can be the greatest, but look, there's a reason he's the number 1 overall draft pick. I will say that the preseason, there have been some, there's been some inconsistency there, but there's been enough kind of wow moments.
Absolutely.
Where you're just sort of like, okay, once we get into the season, look, he's gonna be mobile. We've talked about the weapons that he's been surrounded by, and just again, preseason you're always dealing with small sample sizes, but there have been enough wow moments from Caleb Williams, and honestly, and Jayden Daniels, that makes you think that, you know what, fantasy-wise, both these guys are going to deliver on the hype.
Yep. Bears get a really easy schedule as well, which is nice. After they're finishing the division last year, you can see, Matthew, you've got Jayden Daniels as QB 10, Caleb Williams as QB 13. Did you have any thought about putting Caleb above Jayden at some point, or do you think the rushing upside of Jayden just separates it?
I just think the rushing upside, I think it's two things. I think it's the rushing upside of Jayden Daniels. I also think that, honestly, the Bears are going to be better than the Commanders. I think the Bears have a really good defense. I think the Bears are less likely to be a negative game script where he has to suddenly start throwing a lot. I think they're going to be a more balanced offense. Again, I think you'll see with DeAndre Swift and Khalil Herbert, like Rashawn Johnson, they'll be able to run the ball effectively here. And, obviously as we get colder, Chicago's always tough to play. And so how does Caleb Williams, USC kid, how does he handle, playing in, the frozen tundra of Soldier Field, as it were, over the court. So those are all the things that you sort of like nitpick a little bit there that I think from a fantasy perspective, Daniels will be a negative game script more, and just his rushing is just so ridiculously high, gives him just such a high floor week in, week out.
And Matt Eberflus he's been pretty outspoken about that this summer. He said, listen, we know he can make the big play for us. We'd like to keep it dialed in. When we need the big play from him, then we'll unleash that. So obviously Jayden Daniels might be in more of a script, like you said, Matthew. Jay, how about this one? Keon Coleman.
But both guys are going too late in drafts. I'll just say that. And I know there's a lot of drafts that are still going on this week. A lot have already happened, but again.
Particularly, I think, because Jayden Daniels can be a league winner. Like,
yes.
I saw the stats that he put up en route to a Heisman video game type of player. I think Caleb can be awesome, but just with the lack of rushing compared to Daniels, probably doesn't have the same type of ceiling. Whereas, if Jayden Daniels finishes as QB3 in fantasy, is anyone that shocked?
I mean, you could legitimately get 80-yard rush performances from him week in and week out with a touchdown, and that totally changes everything.
He can be Justin Fields with passing.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, Justin Fields, would have those kind of games, would have like 85 yards rushing, 120 yards rushing, but the passing would be inconsistent. I would argue that Jayden Daniels I think Jayden Daniels is a more polished passer.
Yep. 2 years ago, Justin Fields was QB6, and Jayden Daniels, that's well within the range of possibilities.
The next one, Keon Coleman and Brian Thomas Jr. are going to be full-time starters in week 1, Jay.
Yeah, I feel better about Brian Thomas Jr. there, because I just think I think he's a bit more polished and ready. And Keon Coleman is always concerned, Connor, with his type of profile where didn't create a ton of separation in college, dependent on being the DeAndre Hopkins type who is going to win with contested catches, which makes me a little bit more nervous. I mean, all the reports about Brian Thomas Jr. out of preseason have been amazing. And you always get a little bit worried about like the viral practice clips that made George Pickens a rookie sensation. Preseason, they didn't really live up to it, but I mean, the talent is amazing. I think the opportunity is there. Like, he could be the number 1 wide receiver for Trevor Lawrence. That's well within the range of outcomes.
I mean, to put in perspective the athleticism, it's like him and Christian Watson are that athletic. Really, nobody else in the position in this league, Matthew. That's how different Brian Thomas Jr. is.
He is. Obviously, there's competition with Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram. They also signed Gabe Davis to a pretty big deal in this offseason. But Brian Thomas had an 81% route participation with Trevor Lawrence this preseason in terms of the snaps that the starters played. He's going to be an every down starter. It's going to be him and Gabe Davis on the outside, Kirk and Ingram in the middle, obviously. And so it's going to be a pass-first offense in Jacksonville. I agree with you. I think Thomas more polished. And even though there's a lot of target competition, probably less than there is for Keon Coleman, who's got to deal with. They're going to be more run-heavy this year. I mean, they're not going to be a run-heavy offense. They're going to be more run-heavy than they've been in the past. The Bills are under Joe Brady. They went more balanced last year, and then you're also dealing with Curtis Samuel and Shakur and Dalton Kincaid, as we've talked about here. But Keon Coleman, 100% route participation with the starters this year. When the Buffalo Bills starters were out there, Keon Coleman was out there for every single snap, ran every single route. And more importantly, as we've talked about many times on the show, 241 targets have been vacated from the Bills by the loss of Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis.
Yeah, there is the Bills' offense is so strangely constructed where it's like everyone is a slot receiver. Like everyone just wants to play in the slot. Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, Dalton Kincaid obviously is lining up wide. So like someone has to go outside, and it's like it's MVS. Like Keon Coleman, there is a huge opportunity for him there. I just worry about the polish. And Josh Allen it's hard to say like Josh Allen's a tough quarterback to play with. I think he's the second best quarterback on the planet, but he is the type of guy where we saw there was a bit of a learning curve with Kincaid because he does so much in chaos out of structure. So it might be a bit tough for a rookie of Coleman's prototype, but there's a huge ceiling there.
Another preseason storyline, and this one Denny Carter approved. Taysom Hill is going to be a big part of the Saints offense this year, and in leagues where he has tight end eligibility, he is significantly undervalued, Matthew.
He had 8 games last year with 10 or more touches, averaged 14.5 fantasy points per game. He scored a rushing touchdown in the preseason already. Like they're using him in the backfield. Take away the tight end thing for a second. Just think about how the Saints are currently constructed. Okay, Kendre Miller is once again banged up. Jamal Williams showed nothing last year. Behind Alvin Kamara, they don't really have much in that running back depth field, and they don't have that much in that backfield in terms of running back depth. When they get in close, I think there's a chance that Taysom Hill is their goal line back this year. He is their, or at least splits some of the goal line work with Alvin Kamara. Then you think about the chance that he always has a chance to throw a touchdown pass here or there, that they do different things with him, they use him. Also, by the way, after Chris Olave, there's not really an established other wide receiver. Like, we like Rashid Shaheed. You've seen moments from A.T. Perry. You'll see Juwan Johnson. He's healthy, their actual tight end. But the fact of the matter is that Taysom Hill is a mismatch guy, and their new offense coordinator, Clint Kubiak, is going to take advantage of that, put him in motion, and do a lot of different things with Taysom Hill. And so, again, it's not always going to be pretty, and there's going to be some inconsistency here. But when you get into the number 2 tight ends, the touchdown-dependent tight ends, who's got a better chance of scoring a touchdown week in, week out than Taysom Hill when you get to that 10 through 20 range?
Yep. Connor, I think as well a low-key thing about the Saints, just because kind of everything is low-key about the Saints. Like no one thinks about the Saints this year. They're probably the most nondescript team in the league where there's just, they were uninspiring last year and there's a lot of roster continuity this year, so you figure they might be uninspiring again. Their offensive line could be an absolute disaster. Like it is a real mess. Trevor Penning, it just hasn't happened for him at right tackle. Derek Carr is going to be under siege again. And so I think they're just going to have to do weird creative stuff to survive, and Taysom Hill is the embodiment of weird creative stuff.
It's a great point, Jay. I mean, you could make a sound argument this is the worst offensive line in the league on paper right now. And if you don't believe that, it's hard to argue that they're not in the bottom 3 to 5 behind with a quarterback under center that gets very erratic under pressure. I know a lot of quarterbacks do, but he's not running away from a lot of people. So I agree with that point. Kind of increases the manufactured touches for Taysom Hill.
It also makes you feel good about, like, if you've drafted Alvin Kamara, if you're about to. Again, like, he's just going to be this PPR cheat. This PPR cheat code where it's just nothing but dump-offs because he's constantly under pressure.
All right, a running back that is not a PPR cheat code but could find more passing work. How about Ken Walker is going to be used as a bell cow back in Seattle and will have a much bigger role in the passing game than previous years. Jay, this is a team that not that long ago they took Zach Charbonnet in the second round, but this is still Kenneth Walker's backfield right now.
Yeah, I think the shine has come off Walker a little bit for whatever reason because he was so exciting in his rookie season when he was breaking 66-yard touchdown runs, and he was a bit of home run or bust. There were elements of that where it seemed like he was always trying to break the run, and then he's constantly dealing with these little nagging injuries, which again have taken the shine off. And Zach Charbonnet, who they took relatively high in the draft a couple years ago, but new offensive coordinator. I think this team and this offense is just going to be really good and a lot better than people expect. They're over under 7.5. I think this is a 9 or 10 win team. I think they're going to have better game script than they did last year, and I think this is going to be an explosive offense. And Ken Walker, like he is the guy until proven otherwise.
Yeah, I think we're all excited about what Ryan Grubb's going to bring to this offense as well. Ken Walker has been a good pass catcher when he's gotten the opportunity. They just didn't use him that way in college that much. They haven't used him that much in the pros. But when he's gotten that opportunity, Connor, he's been able to turn those into big plays as well. I know one. Now that Seattle, there's been a regime change, but I will tell you from very good source, and we talked about this his rookie year on this show, was that they in the preseason of his rookie year. Good source of mine from Seattle says, like, they think he can be LaDainian Tomlinson. Now, again, that's crazy high praise, obviously, but just to give you an idea of, like, what they believe his skill set could be in terms of a true 3-down back, somebody that, like, is that special. And so it does seem like all the conversation we've heard and people that I've talked to that have been at camp just keep telling me, and we've heard these beat reports as well, that like it's going to be Ken Walker's backfield. He's going to be and so for an offense that you think is going to be better than people think, Ken Walker is somebody when he's gotten big work, he has been very, very productive. 20 career games where he's gotten at least 15 touches, 16.6 fantasy points per game, averaging over 97 yards from scrimmage per game.
The only thing that ever gets in his way is health, right?
Yeah.
And right now, things are looking really good
He's
for
healthy.
Kenneth Walker. So, all right, we're going to move over to your chicken players, Matthew. I always enjoy when you explain
So these
this
are,
one.
before we can move on, just like, and you go to rotoworld.com, you can see the entire list, 10 lists of 10, that's what it is. And so we have 7 other preseason storylines that I haven't gotten to. But anyway, check out the article. But yes, another list is in fact my chicken players.
The players that you just feel a little off, a little nervous.
Yeah, well, when Jim Harbaugh, when he's coached the University of Michigan, he's coached the Wolverines, he told his players never to eat chicken, that they should not eat chicken because the chicken is a nervous bird.
Yeah.
That was the
Fairly
famous
good
quote.
source of protein,
Yeah.
lean protein, but that's okay.
Yeah, but
Probably
like,
pivotal for college football players.
yes, it is. But like if you could suddenly be, deep fried and nuggeted, made into a nugget, you'd be nervous too. So the fact is that he just says, the chicken's a nervous bird was Jim Harbaugh's quote. So I do this list every year where it's just these are my chicken players, the ones that make me nervous. Again, I have them ranked appropriately. They're all being drafted appropriately. I get it. But when I come up to them in the draft, I tend to choose somebody else that's ranked kind of around the same way just because bad vibes, for lack of a better phrase. Like I'm a little nervous about Puka already banged up, right? And that I think Cooper Kupp might be the alpha in that backfield. That I just think Puka's being a little bit overdrafted, right? And so you see some of the guys there as well. Stroud, we've talked about this, like he was so efficient last year and he doesn't really run and he's being drafted as a top 5 fantasy quarterback. Rashad White you see there as well. Again, the volume, just a couple of, these are all just guys in terms of where they're being drafted. Ayuk, because he's missed so much at camp, makes me nervous. Pickens, the quarterback situation is so dicey. And Arthur Smith, Arthur Smith single-handedly killed Drake London's fantasy value. But I'll tell you one name that you saw there real quickly that I'll just start off here is Saquon Barkley. Is Saquon one of the most talented running backs in the NFL? Of course he is. All right. Is Saquon been a fantasy superstar since he came into the league? Of course he is. Here's why I'm nervous. First off, obviously, there's always injury concerns with Saquon. He's going he's going basically in the top 15 picks. You have to spend a first rounder or at least a high second round pick on him. And so there's a concern that he's going to a team that traditionally has not thrown to the running back before. That's always been such a big part of Saquon's game is pass catching, and yet Jalen Hurts just as a pro has just never been one of the guys that dumps off to running backs. He either likes to chuck it deep or he tucks it and runs. And then you talk about touchdown equity. Again, better offensive line than he had with the Giants. They'll be in scoring position more often, so I get all those arguments, but also you're talking about a player in Jalen Hurts that has had the most rushing touchdowns of any player in the NFL over the last 2 years. The most rushing touchdowns. I mean, that the tush push is a real thing, and even though Jason Kelce is no longer there, like it's still a play that they're going to use. And so if you tell me there's a chance his touchdowns aren't where we need them to be, there's a chance his passing game production isn't where we need it to be, and there's always the chance of injury, I don't know. He makes me nervous.
Yep. Yeah.
That's
Getting
all. He's
older.
great.
Yeah.
He could be awesome. He makes me nervous.
We spoke about this last week, some of the underlying metrics on Saquon around his explosiveness and his broken missed tackle rate, that has fallen off. And that, independent of the Giants' offensive line in that situation, has fallen off. So there are concerns just with the age. And to me, the main thing is just like, when you have a quarterback who runs 150 times a year, you just kind of run out of plays. Like, how many times is he actually going to be able to get the ball? Like, can he maximize and get a lot more usage than DeAndre Swift did last year? And Swift was healthy the whole season. I agree. I think that there are concerns about Saquon, and there are other running backs going in that range that, like, even, like I'd much rather have Jonathan Taylor or Saquon Barkley, who's going like 2 picks, within the same range as Saquon. I'd rather wait and get like a Devin Achane, or even like Kyron Williams is starting to slide a bit too much, I think, in the draft. So I think there are better options than Saquon at cost.
Jay, how about Devontae Adams on that list? A guy that's, getting way away from 30 right now. Gardner Minshew's his quarterback, and we've seen Gardner support receivers in fantasy before, but this is just an offense that has a lot of question marks right now.
A lot of questions, just the bad vibes type of offense, even if it's a better vibes type of team with Antonio Pierce.
He's been
now in
frustrated
town.
there before.
Yeah,
very loudly.
it just doesn't feel like it's going to end that well for Davante Adams. And I think the thing is, last year, I believe he was second in the NFL in targets. And he still wasn't able to produce a top 5 fantasy season. Now he's a year older, into his early 30s. There's not a ton of competition, but between Jacoby Myers, Brock Bowers, who I know you're nervous about as well, Matthew, there are more guys there. And I think the biggest concern is, like, what is the upside with this quarterback situation? Like, Gardner Minshew is not the long-term answer. He may not be the answer right now. And if it's Aiden O'Connell instead, we saw that experience last year. So I just don't really know what the upside is for Davante Adams. I think the upside really is that he's on a different team by week 7. That's where the upside
That's
is.
what you're
Exactly
hoping.
right.
You're hoping he gets traded, and maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. But it just feels like, in terms of where he's going among the wide receivers that he's being drafted at, that's a narrow hole that you're trying to, like, sort of, thread that needle of, like, oh, I hope he gets traded, to the Jets and he's reunited with Aaron Rodgers or whatever.
At the price he's going at.
the
it's
price
too
he's
much
going,
risk.
like, there's some really good wide receivers that he's going ahead of or right around. And to your point, like, again, 32 on a run-first offense that probably is with a bad quarterback. And yes, I mean, like, Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers are not nothing. And the other thing, it's just one of those, like, if I'm bailing a year too early, but I'd rather be out a year too early than a year too late. I just feel like, and not through any faults of his own, but it just might be the end of Davante Adams' elite fantasy wide receiver.
Yep, he was second in the NFL targets with 175 targets a game, and he averaged 67 yards per game. And a lot of that, like, Jimmy Garoppolo was horrific
Brutal
to start the season, and those comical long touchdowns that were missed. But still, like, I'm not sure the situation is that much better now.
Another notable name on this list, Matthew, Michael Pittman, who gives you a really high floor in PPR, but a guy that doesn't catch a lot of touchdowns historically. And now you have a healthy Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor who are going to get a lot of touchdown equity in this offense.
Do they get more? So Pittman has suddenly got a little bit more target competition than he has previously. He used to be kind of this PPR cheat code because he was like all they had. But last year, Josh Downs emerged, and now there's questions about Josh Downs if he's going to be healthy for week 1, but he'll be out there sooner than later. They drafted A.D. Mitchell, and they seem to really like him as well. And as you mentioned, Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, this is an offense that wants to run the ball, that wants to be methodical and control the clock, play good defense. And the concern here is that Michael Pittman, who's, to your point, has never been a big touchdown. He's like 4 to 5 touchdowns a year, basically, is generally speaking. So the key to Pittman having a big fantasy season is just massive volume. And does he get it on an offense that may not have as many drives, that may try to grind it out a little bit more, maybe more run heavy, slightly more target competition? Just makes me nervous. He's a high floor player, and I kind of like Pittman in guillotine leagues this year because, again, he's just kind of got that high floor, but just feels like there's no upside here, and there is some downside, which is concerning given where he's going in drafts.
Yeah, I think it's just similar to Saquon. It's kind of a math thing where Jonathan Taylor stays healthy. He's getting 250 carries. Like, that's only 14.5 carries per game across a 17-game season. Anthony Richardson's going to run the ball 150-plus times. All right, that's 400 plays gone there, and we haven't even got to throwing the ball or any other one running the ball. And so I think with Pittman, like, he hasn't had to deal with rushing quarterbacks previously. He's been playing with, Carson Wentz and Matt Ryan and Gardner Minshew, and he has just been eating up all these targets. And I think with added competition around him, and then just with Richardson running the ball, and also, like, Taylor hasn't been fit for 3 years now, and you just expect on average that he's going to play more than he has the past 2 seasons.
Our next list, unsexy players who will help you win. Let's take a look at the top 10 here, Matthew, and for those listening, we'll read them off real quick. James Conner, Alvin Kamara, Christian Kirk, Joe Mixon, Raheem Mostert, DeAndre Hopkins, Najee Harris, Brian Robinson Jr., Chris Godwin, and Devin Motor Singletary. Seems like the lone man right now in that Giants backfield.
All these guys, none of these guys have any buzz whatsoever, and they're sort of quote-unquote snoozy picks. Like, again, you draft Malik Neighbors in your draft, and everyone's going to be like, oh, yeah, Malik Neighbors, love him this year. You draft James Conner, no one's going like, oh, man, I wanted him. Like, these are all snoozy guys, but I will tell you, every single one of these players is going to outperform ADP. They're all values. They are unsexy players who will help you win. Let's talk about James Conner there for an example. We've talked about him a decent amount on this show. Last year, 4th among running backs in scrimmage yards per game. He averaged over 92 yards from scrimmage. And by the way, the Cardinals were much worse than they're going to be this year with a healthy Kyler Murray, the addition of Marvin Harrison. Suddenly, and Trey McBride is now a real threat. The human Dortch, Greg Dortch. Mark my words, Greg Dortch is going to have a year. They're suddenly there's a lot more weapons in that offense, and the running lane should be open for James Conner, who has had back-to-back seasons averaging over 17 touches per game. He's been a top 15 fantasy running back on a points per game basis in every year he's been in Arizona. And I know everyone's all excited. I get it. There's a little bit of an injury concern, but he's mostly stayed healthy the last couple of years. And so where James Conner is going in drafts is just criminal.
Yeah, I think the thing too with James Conner, because he's been around for a long time, people might not, if you're not watching Conner's games, he's gotten better. He's gotten better as a player. He was 4th last year in PFF grade. He was 3rd in the NFL in rushing yards per game. And he did that without having a real quarterback situation for half the season. And again, with running backs, having a rushing quarterback, even though it takes away some volume, it is just a cheat code in terms of taking a man out of the box, makes everyone's life easier. And also, he's just a monster at the goal line as well, James Conner. So I think of all the running backs being drafted right now, he is the guy who has the most value.
He's a true 3-down back, and I know everyone loves Trey Benson. But
seems a little far away right now, though. Didn't light the world on fire this summer.
He didn't, and by the way, after Trey Benson, it's Amari DiMarcardo.
Right. They cut Michael Carter.
Right, they cut Michael Carter. It's going to be his backfield, guys. It's going to be his backfield. He's going to get a ton of work, and you're going to look up once again at the end of the season. Go this running back that got drafted is running back 23 is running back 14, and again, he will be somebody. He is an unsexy pick, but he will help you win your league.
Jay, we talked about the upside of Brian Thomas Jr. in Jacksonville's offense, but a guy that might not have upside, but is just reliable and good in fantasy, Christian Kirk, who lives in their slot and has been really good for a couple years now.
Yep. Again, deeply unsexy player because he's Christian Kirk. No one's excited to draft Christian Kirk. But the thing is with Brian Thomas, talk about the upside, that's a projection. We haven't seen him on the field in a regular season NFL game before. We know exactly what Christian Kirk is. Christian Kirk will be the favorite to be the number 1 wide receiver for Trevor Lawrence. They have that established connection. And also, last year, Kirk was dealing with injuries. Lawrence was banged up every single week, it felt like. I think just on average, Lawrence is going to be healthier. Kirk is going to be healthier. That offense is just going to look better.
He played 11 fully healthy games last year. He had basically a 23% target share. And again, he played a lot out of position last year because of the injuries to Zay Jones. They had to play him on the outside. I've talked about this before on the show, but I'll bring it up once again. I spoke with Doug Peterson at the Combine. I specifically asked him about Kirk, and he's just we need him in the slot. That's where he's more, I'm paraphrasing here, but that's where we like to play him. That's where he's more comfortable. It's where we think we can have the most success with him. And so I think that's one of the reasons why they went out and get Brian Thomas. That's one of the reasons why they signed Gabe Davis as well. Let those guys play on the outside. Here's Kirk in the middle. Again, on a Jacksonville Jaguars offense that is going to be pass first, that is going to be fantasy friendly, is going to push the ball down the field. So Christian Kirk, very, very unsexy, but in 82% of his healthy games over the last 2 seasons, he's gotten at least 6 or more targets. There's just going to be a volume there and a floor of production with upside as well.
How about Chris Godwin? We want to talk about a value, Matthew. It feels like people are just maybe bored of Chris Godwin. I know Jalen McMillan had a nice summer, but this is still the Mike Evans and Chris Godwin.
And he's going to play more in the slot this year, which is his natural position as well. Each of the last 4 seasons where he's played at least 14 games, 120 targets, 80 or more receptions, over 1,000 yards. He was the only wide receiver last year with over 1,000 receiving yards and fewer than 3 touchdowns. Positive touchdown regression is coming. It just has to. It's not like he is allergic to the end zone. He just had a bad touchdown year last year as well. Remember, in 2023, he had a 23.5% target share. There is a connection there with Baker Mayfield. He got at least 6 targets in 14 to 17 games last year. I think people just, because of the lack of touchdowns and because Mike Evans had such resurgence last year and there was, Rachaad White was a big deal in fantasy, people just sort of forget about Chris Godwin. But he's a very talented wide receiver. There's still even though we like McMillan, it's a very narrow target tree. It is Evans and Godwin and Evans really, and McMillan's fine. He's the 3rd wide receiver. Right. You'll get some Cade Otton in there and whatever, Rachaad White out of the backfield. But it's 2 main guys on what should be a competent to above average offense.
Yeah, and I think the upside for Godwin is that this team might just throw the ball more this year. Last year, they ran Rachaad White into the ground for whatever reason. They had a negative pass rate over expected. There is scope that Godwin, and also Godwin, feels like Chris Godwin's like 34 years old. Like he's 28 years old. Like he's not a super old dude. Like he is, he's 3 years younger than Tyreek Hill. So I think that Chris Godwin, he is going to be a source of slot receiver PPR production.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at the 10 best fantasy team
And by the way,
names.
he's not amazing. He's just going to outperform ADP.
Yeah.
He's just somebody that, like, when you're
There's some
drafting, there's
value.
nothing exciting or fun about drafting him, other than the fact that all he's going to do is help you win because he's such a value. Because everyone it's like, it's snoozy. It's no fun.
The unsexy players for a reason. Let's take a look at the 10 best fantasy team names. These are really, really good. Number 1, can you take me, Kyler?
Yeah.
2,
Little Creed.
Yeah, a little Creed action there. 2, very on brand for this show. ETN good in the neighbors hood.
Yeah, that's right. Shout out Applebee's.
Hard to say, but good.
These are really good. 3, McConkey Kong. 4, Rome wasn't built in a Doomsday.
That's
a good
really
one.
good.
That's
That might be the
amazing.
best
That might be the best one. 5, Stroudy with a chance of deep balls. 6, 99 problems, but A-Rich ain't one.
Yep.
7, this is a pretty well-crafted one, too. Sublime with Rome, a Doomsday.
Yep.
8, Cup My Life into Breezes. 9,
It's kind of dark.
Knights Who Say Nico. And 10, Love Thy Neighbors.
A lot of Love Thy Neighbors. Nice to say Nico, kind of a deep cut. That's a Monty Python reference.
Yeah. No, slapped him like a grape. Slapped him like a
Interesting.
grape. Didn't make
Didn't
the
make the
list.
cut.
make the
It was
cut.
number 11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all right.
That's all right.
A Doomsday gives you a lot to work with.
He really does.
Name is in Italian
Neighbors
City,
does.
or
Neighbors, I
Doomsday.
mean, like Neighbors was a ton. I will say this, that there were, I put out the tweet and I asked for all the team name references, everything like that. And just, I will say that there is massive amount of team names named after the Hawk Tua girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't care for that.
Yeah.
Go elsewhere.
Yeah.
Get more creative.
I was going to say, that kind of passed by.
Yeah.
She threw out the first pitch of the Mets game a month ago, and now it's over.
And then the Mets blew a massive lead. to
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Rays.
it was the
So,
start of a curse.
Yeah.
So
I don't think it's over.
I think it's over.
I think she's still on minute 8 or something
I'll
like
gladly
that.
proclaim it's never been
It's
more
done.
over.
Yeah, Connor's
Anyway,
declared about it.
anyway, that was
She missed the
there was
playoffs.
very popular team name. Anyway, inspired by Hawk Tua.
Yes. Well, there's a Tua Tagovailoa in the NFL, which is what kills you there.
Yeah, there you go.
The Roto World Fantasy Football Draft Guide is now available exclusively through a new partnership with Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life. Get a Fantasy Life Plus subscription and
Come on now.
receive the Roto World Draft Guide Plus fantasy, DFS, and betting tools to help you dominate the draft all season long.
By the way, Connor, it's not just draft season. Like these are tools that they're parlay builders. There are start sit advice tools. There are trade advice tools.
hotline to
League
Jay
syncs.
Croucher.
You get Jay's personal home
24/7.
phone number. You get Jay's
24/7.
personal home phone number. You get Connor Rogers' personal email.
Yes, I never respond.
And you get an autographed picture of a Big Show.
That's pretty good. I would sign up for that.
No, but my point is you're like, well, I've already had my draft. I don't need this tool. No, this will help you throughout the season,
come on, Connor.
whether you play DFS, whether you bet on sports, whether you do season-long fantasy, or all the above. There's tools to help you throughout the season.
Well, and the best part is there is a promo code right now, Roto10, 10% off. Go to NBCSports.com/FantasyLife to learn more. We're taking our first break. When we're back, more 10 lists of 10 coming up next, including our favorite running backs and wide receivers going after the 10th round on Yahoo. The NFL is kicking off the season with 2 huge matchups. Thursday, September 5th, it's Ravens-Chiefs on NBC and Peacock. And on Friday, live from Brazil, it's Packers-Eagles, only on Peacock. 10 lists of 10 continue. Starting with the favorite running backs going after the 10th round on Yahoo. Let's take a look at some of these players. And some of them you're going to have to be a little bit patient, Matthew, especially a guy like Jonathan Brooks that's starting.
And I want you to look at this screen here as we mentioned. These are some of these players are available in more than 50% of Yahoo leagues. Again, you may have already drafted, and so if you're thinking about your first waivers, so you sort of sit here and go like Tyler Algier. Here are some of the running backs that are available in more than 50% of Yahoo leagues. Rico Dowdle, Tyler Algier, Jaleel McLaughlin, Jordan Mason, Bucky Irving of the Buccaneers, Braylon Allen of the Jets, Tyrone Tracy, our guy, Connor Rogers. Tyrone Tracy, I don't understand.
Seem to get healthy. That number's shocking.
Yeah.
8%.
He's
rostered.
Tyrone Tracy is going to be a thing this year. And so, by the way, Jordan Mason, you see there, just quick news, Trent Williams, the all-pro left tackle of the San Francisco 49ers, agreeing to terms earlier today. He's back in camp. Great news for Chris McCaffrey, obviously, for the entire offensive line.
now.
He's practicing. McCaffrey's back at practice. That's great news. And oh, by the way, Brandon Ayuk also back. But just for Brock Purdy, for those of us who drafted Brock Purdy, super small sample size last year, but in the 2 games that Trent Williams missed, Debo also missed it as well, but he was bad. Like Brock Purdy was bad without Trent Williams last year, and so just having your left tackle extended, having your all-pro, your all-world left tackle, that's a good news for the entire Niners offense. So just wanted to mention there, of course, Jordan Mason is the number 1 insurance back for McCaffrey, given that Elijah Mitchell now out for the season.
Yep, just quickly one name on that list. Rico Dowdle, there's been some buzz that he might be the number 1 running back for the Dallas Cowboys, which he can't have to be more than 50% drafted. Like the Cowboys could have a top 3, top 5 offense, just like they did last year, and it would make sense that he would be in that position, given that we kind of know what Ezekiel Elliott is.
Yeah, I mean, they just signed Dalvin Cook. I mean, like whatever. Like there's a non-zero chance Rico Dowdle is the leading running back for the Cowboys. 100% needs to be rostered in a lot more than 50% of leagues.
Another player on that list, Matthew, and Jonathan Brooks. I mean, we've seen running backs, notably Rachaad White, with Dave Canales catching a million passes. It feels like when Brooks is finally healthy, he could find himself in that role for the Panthers.
A massive, right? Last season on Canales, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers ranked top 10 in running back receiving yards. So true 3-down back. Like, we joked about this with Rachaad White last year, but like whatever. Rachaad White's averaging 3.3 yards per carry, and like Dave Canales is like, I don't care. Still getting 18 touches. Like, I mean, like, so Jonathan Brooks, who is more talented than Rachaad White, we need him back healthy, obviously, but this is somebody that I think, Connor, you felt like was the most talented running back coming into the class this year.
He's just different in space. That's where you want to use him. And this is an offense that wants to get the running back in space and throw him the ball. They want the ball out of Bryce Young's hands. So I think Brooks is a really worthwhile stash right now. And Jay, you could say the same. You don't have to wait for this guy, but Jaleel McLaughlin will also be a pass-catching back in an offense that wants to utilize multiple backs in Denver.
Yeah, particularly because I think there's this idea that it's like definitely going to be Javonte Williams' backfield, and it's probably going to start that way, but I don't think that Sean Payton has some massive attachment to Javonte Williams, so there is scope for Jaleel McLaughlin. I also like your man Audric Estime, who I think could become a guy. Like Audric Estime is getting drafted outside like the top 220.
I mean, let's talk about this backfield here for a second, right? I mean, so last year when Jaleel McLaughlin got at least 10 touches, he averaged 14.3 fantasy points per game. He had 4 different games where he got double-digit touches, right? He was 8th in fantasy points per touch, so he is highly efficient as well. He's a really nice pass catcher. He's somebody that sort of Sean Payton found. To your point, like he inherited Javonte Williams. He found Jaleel McLaughlin. And I think more importantly is that, so Sean Payton has traditionally always used his running backs as pass catchers. So, and Javonte Williams can catch passes as well, but over the weekend, Samaje Perine was released by the Denver Broncos. And we'll talk about Perine here in a second in terms of where he landed. But that backfield is now, it's Javonte Williams, it's Jaleel McLaughlin, it's Audric Estime. And that's kind of it in terms of like a pecking order. So to your point, like I think there's a very real chance that McLaughlin immediately has kind of a third down plus role. Like he probably every third series he gets kind of the lead.
A change of pace.
Pace guy. He gets some more run, everything like that. But I do think, and that there's an opportunity for him to, pardon the pun, take the job and run with it as well. Javonte Williams is going to be the one to start the season, but McLaughlin's going to have a role on the field, and I think there's a chance that role expands as well. The other thing I just want to mention here is Samaje Perine got picked up by the Chiefs, and so it'll take him a minute to get up to speed, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire placed on the non-football, the NFI list, I guess, whatever. So he's going to miss at least the first 4 games of the season. Non-football injury-related list, I forget exactly what it's called. But
the NFI,
the NFI list, yeah. And so my point is that you look at this Chiefs backfield, and all of a sudden it's Pacheco, and then it's like it's Samaje Perine and Carson Steele. And so
was not drafted.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, Samaje Perine suddenly becomes the insurance back for Pacheco, but also could inherit kind of the quote-unquote Jerick McKinnon role in this offense. Now, we still expect Pacheco to be more involved in the passing game. I still think Pacheco's going to have a monster year. But Samaje Perine has suddenly gone from a guy that, isn't being drafted at all to suddenly needs to be rostered.
Yeah.
Because he's the number 2. He's going to have an offensive role, and he's the number 2 guy on one of the best offenses in football.
Jerick McKinnon won people their leagues 2 years ago.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Our next one here, and Tyler Algier, Jay. I mean, it's obvious if you're taking one of the top running backs. If you draft CMC, you should draft Jordan Mason. If you draft Breece Hall, you should draft Braylon Allen. But the guy with an actual proven backup is Bijan Robinson, because Tyler Algier has had production already in this league, unlike the other two guys.
Yep, he has. And look, in terms of predicting injuries, I would say that the best guideline for predicting injuries for running backs, just look at the guys who carry the ball the most and who get the touches the most, because that's where the most attrition comes from. And so Bijan Robinson, who's been healthy throughout his career, he's still going to touch the ball a ton and get a ton of work, and so he has a risk to go down. And if he does go down, then Tyler Algier is back to being the lead back as he was in his rookie season when he rushed for over 1,000 yards and was extremely efficient. So I think it's going to be a struggle for him to provide much production when Bijan is there, though he still gets some work in deeper leagues. But I think that, if he does go down Bijan, then obviously Tyler Algier becomes a massive, massive fantasy asset.
Before we move off this list very quickly, we mentioned Jonathan Brooks, and we really like his potential once he comes back. But until he comes back, it's going to be Chuba Hubbard, who's still out there in a ton of leagues. And again, he's going to be the lead. He's going to get a ton of work on what we think will be a competent offense this year, with an improved offensive line and a better season for Bryce Young, more weapons on the offense as well. So Chuba Hubbard, I think, is going to be useful for the first
cheap
four.
Volume. We say it all the time.
Cheap volume. I'm not worried about Miles Sanders at all. It's going to be Chuba Hubbard's going to be solid. He's going to be a solid flex play for the first month of the season.
Let's do the same thing for wide receivers. These guys are going after the 10th round on Yahoo. I'll run through them real quickly if you're listening to the show. Brian Thomas Jr., who we talked in length about at the top. Jamison Williams, bigger role this year for the Lions. Khalil Shakur, Joshua Palmer, Rashid Shaheed, Dontavian Wicks, Josh Downs, who that little red marker next to him, listen, he might miss week 1. We'll see. Josh Downs is going to be an effective fantasy player. Darnell Mooney, Greg Dortch, Luke McCaffrey. Matthew, something...
Both those guys, I'm just telling you right now, I've said it a million times, because I'm going to victory lap this when this happens. Greg Dortch and Luke McCaffrey are both going to be things this year.
Might be week 18, but we'll see.
They will be, I'm just telling you, at some point this year, Dortch and McCaffrey are both going to be things this year.
We're going to do a weekly check-in on Luke McCaffrey. You're going to be held to this one.
That's fine. And the human Dortch, Greg Dortch, he's another one of my guys.
Yeah, I'm worried on that one.
Our show needs a beat reporter covering the Commanders, just so we can do check-ins.
Our show needs a beat reporter covering me. We should really do that.
That would be really good.
Does somebody want the Matthew Berry beat on Fantasy Football?
Traffic on I-95 is not looking good this morning, folks.
He's 3 Diet Cokes in.
Yeah. All right. Jay, something you've pointed out time and time again the last couple of weeks is that no number 1 wide receiver for Justin Herbert should be left for dead in fantasy, and that's kind of happened with Joshua Palmer.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago. I understand it's a different offense. He doesn't have the same weapons, but a couple years ago, Justin Herbert threw for 5,000 yards. It was QB2. He's one of, I think, the 6 most talented quarterbacks on earth right now. And I get that they're probably not going to throw the ball a ton, but I think the offensive line could be fine. Rashawn Slater at left tackle, Joe out, right tackle. Interior isn't as strong, but I think this is going to be a solid offensive line. And the thing is, Jim Harbaugh's just going to figure it out. Jim Harbaugh is a really good coach. He wins wherever he goes. And I think that Justin Herbert is going to throw the ball. He's going to throw the ball sometimes.
Yeah,
and Josh Palmer and Ladd McConkey are the
even
only
if
two
they
guys.
lead the NFL in rushing attempts, he's still going to be at 40 to 45% pass rate.
Yeah.
Even if they run the ball 60% of the time, which would be a massive number, it's still right, to your point. And again, Josh Palmer, 16 career games with 7 or more targets, 14.4 fantasy points per game. He's the only wide receiver to have caught at least 40 passes in his career from Justin Herbert. There's, and everyone's all excited about Ladd McConkey, and I get it, but it doesn't feel like Quentin Johnson has done anything, and so it's
Chalk.
Yeah, it's gonna be Palmer's gonna be the number 1. He's got a shot at it, him and McConkey, and so he's going too late. As we showed you that list, there are a lot of guys on there that, again, similar. If you already had your draft, you're going through waivers tonight. Again, like we mentioned, Josh Downs, Dontavian Wicks, mentioned Dortch and Luke McCaffrey. But how about Jamison Williams as well? Connor, we've talked about this. Had he not been hurt the year he came out of Alabama, he'd have been the number 1 wide receiver.
He probably goes ahead of Drake London and Garrett Wilson for majority of teams, which that speaks to the talent he has, which is notably the speed. But he's a good route runner. He can track the ball. Jared Goff's a great deep thrower. They play all their games indoors this year. Jamison Williams has a legit role in this offense. It can't just be Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta every single play.
Yep.
We saw last year how Josh Reynolds would continually have some nice little games there. Again, to your point about Goff on the deep ball, 3rd in the NFL in terms of completion percentage on deep passes. And the drumbeat has been steady in the offseason during training camp from Dan Campbell, who's a fairly honest coach. Just about they're expecting big things this year from Jameson Williams.
Yep, a lot of chat about how his route trees become more sophisticated, more intermediate stuff, less kind of just dependence on being a gadget player. So, I mean, yeah, it kind of like necessity is the mother of invention there. Like he kind of has to do more and has to be good because they don't have anyone. They didn't replace Josh Reynolds really. Like the replacement for Josh Reynolds is more Jameson Williams.
Because they invested so much in Jameson Williams.
Yeah.
They traded up and gave up a lot of assets to get him. Now is the time. All the distractions are put aside. How about Khalil Shakir here, Jay? Obviously, new offensive coordinator Joe Brady, or new-ish because he took over halfway through last year. Big fan of Shakir. Somebody's got to catch these targets that's not Dalton Kincaid from Josh Allen.
Yeah, this is a version, again, of Josh Palmer with Justin Herbert. Like, there is a good chance that Khalil Shakir is the number one wide receiver for the second best quarterback on planet Earth in Josh Allen. So I just think that Shakir, of all the wide receivers on the roster, he is the one who showed the most last season. And I think we're going to see a lot of Dalton Kincaid. We'll see what happens with Kellen Coleman. I think Shakir might have the highest floor of all of those guys at receiver.
Curtis Samuel already banged up. Once Joe Brady took over as the offense coordinator in Week 11, he started playing 69% of the snaps. He was playing 33% before. Sorry, 39% before. But, just 30% more snaps immediately upon Joe Brady. And as we talked about, almost 250 targets up for grabs.
Matthew, let's take a look at your most rostered players here.
I've done about 25 drafts of non-best ball, leagues that I'm going to play out this year. And so these are the guys that wind up on my team the most. Kyler Murray, of course, my ride or die, makes no... Jaden Daniels, especially in Superflex leagues, goes way too late. I love Isaiah Pacheco. A lot of Derrick Henry as well, including in the League of Assholes, I have Derrick Henry. Brian Robinson, guys. Brian Robinson's going to score double-digit touchdowns. You can have the beat reporter mark that down, too. Check in on that one as well.
You heard it, Big Show. You got the job.
You got it, Big Show. I'm just telling you, Brian Robinson's going to be the lead back of the Commanders, and they're going to run when they get in close. Malik Neighbors, I just absolutely love him. Him and Deontay Johnson, just massive target share for both those guys. Tank Dell, I want us to talk to Nico and Diggs, which I get, but Tank Dell is still my guy. How about Trey McBride and Dalton Kincaid? You guys have talked. I've talked a lot about how I want to have elite tight ends this year. I prefer McBride and Kincaid where they go because I don't think there's much difference between them and Laporta Kelsey, except for the fact that Laporta Kelsey go 1 or 2 rounds ahead.
Noticeable lack of fantasy life investors on this list. Just an observation.
Well, I do have a decent amount of Josh Allen, but the problem is that they're so good. Well, so let's go through the
ADPs.
The fantasy life investors that would be relevant are Josh Allen, Joe Burrow,
Jamar Chase,
Austin Eckler.
Say that I memorized them.
Yeah.
Genuinely, I could memorize those better than
love them all.
Text Jamar and find out if he's going to play week 1.
I don't know. I don't want to mess with that.
That doesn't come with the investment.
I don't want to mess with that. Listen, I talked to his dad a decent amount. But I have not asked that question.
Ask his dad.
It's none of my business,
Okay.
honestly.
That's a little shaky there, by the way.
What?
Jamar Chase situation. Not feeling great about it.
The coach body language is all over the place.
And by the way, just as we're talking about sort of the wide receivers, Andre Yoshevich is kind of interesting, right? Because if Jamar Chase isn't there for week 1, it's T. Higgins and Yoshevich. And by the way, even if Chase is there, I think there's a chance that he's the slot receiver. Now, by the end of the year, it might be Jermaine Burton, but to start the season, I think it's going to be Chase and Higgins on the outside and Yoshevich. That's how I say it, right? Yoshevich?
Yeah, I think you got it.
I think that's it.
We need him to have a bad year, so we have to stop saying his name.
Yeah, well, but my point is I don't think Jermaine Burton's ready for primetime just yet. And so Yoshevich, who's been in the system, has a comfort level with Joe Burrow, proud fantasy life investor Joe Burrow.
Speed element. Another speed element for them.
Just
push the ball down the field.
Just anyway, he's a guy that's absolutely free and there's a chance he's 7 for 86 against the Patriots week 1 because Jamar Chase isn't in uniform.
Speaking of fantasy life, how about the 10 best fantasy team names from Fantasy Life? The first one, April Showers Bring Zay Flowers.
Yeah, sure.
Better Call Hall, Big Nick's Energy, for whom
Do you get that one?
I picked up on it, believe it or not. For whom Tank Dell tolls.
Good.
Gino Grigio.
Also solid.
Not bad.
I drink a lot of Gino Grigio.
Yeah.
I know you do.
There might be a good pitch to Geno Smith out there. I got to figure out how to make Mooney on this thing. That's real good. I'm just Ken. It's Walker the third. Not like Gus. This is your final Warren. To Infinity and Devon. These are pretty good.
Yeah.
Good. Not bad.
Those are all very good.
Gino Grigio was good.
It's hard to come up with a team name that isn't dirty.
These are the PG ones.
Right, these are the ones that I'm allowed to put on TV or print.
Yes.
Again,
A
lot of Hawk 201s. A lot of Hawk
Hawk
201s are
cutting room floor, so to speak.
yeah, not family appropriate.
Floor. Very well done.
Not family friendly. Yeah.
Yeah, all right, I'll get us out of here. Fantasy season just got better this season, $1 million better. Creator join a private Yahoo Fantasy League and enter the $1 million NBC sweepstakes. Plus, earn extra entries to win when players on your fantasy roster score a touchdown during an opening weekend game on NBC or Peacock. Download the redesigned Yahoo Fantasy app or go to NBCSports.com/fantasymillion to learn more. We are taking one more break when we're back. Our best bets for Coach of the Year right after this. DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns, and new customers can bet $5 and get $200, $250 even, in bonus bets instantly. Plus, get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Download the app and use promo code Barry when you sign up. DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours. It is time for last call. Let's take a look at the Coach of the Year odds from DraftKings. Jay, what do you like on this board?
I like Dave Canales at plus 1,800. Spoken about this before. I just think that it will be one of the cleanest Coach of the Year cases of all time. If he takes the Carolina Panthers from 2 wins last year to a playoff spot this year, they're plus 550 to make the playoffs. They have an easy schedule. It is such a clean case because he fixed Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith. He can fix Bryce Young. They go from 2 wins to 9, 10 wins on the playoffs. There's your Coach of the Year.
And it does, just to your point, like they're 550 to make the playoffs, but they're 18-1 for Coach of the Years. That doesn't. Yeah. Those odds
he should be the favorite for the award, in my opinion.
Yeah, they should.
What about you, Matthew?
I'm going to go Brian Callahan of the Tennessee Titans, 20-1. He wasn't even on that board, but I think everyone's sleeping on the Titans, but they're going to be much more pass heavy. It depends on Will Levis, but if Will Levis can be that guy, they've added a lot of speed to that passing game. I think they're a much better offensive line as well. Titans suddenly, again, if they get to the playoffs, which there's an easy path there. Titans, give me Brian Callahan, 20-1.
I'm going to take Raheem Morris. Obviously, this is not the craziest odds, 13-1 right now. He's a couple names down the board. The Falcons are minus 130 to win this division. They're simply going to be very, very good. I think Raheem Morris' story, how long his coaching ride has been, is easy to root for. This team's going to be great with Kirk Cousins under center. They got defensive stalwarts now in Matt Judon, Justin Simmons. It's hard for people to grasp that the Falcons are going to be really good, but I simply think that's going to be the case. I think they're going to run away with this division.
Yep, there are worlds where they're a 12, 13 win, 2 seed. They make a 5-6 win improvement, and everyone loves Raheem Morris.
Yeah, he's an easy guy to root for. That's another thing. That's one of the narrative is part of that award, though, is just the narrative. To your point, Dave Canales is taking over what a disaster that was. Or even Brian Callahan. He's coaching with his dad. Right. He goes to Tennessee.
No expectations.
Yeah,
some people think they could be one of the worst teams in the AFC.
For sure. All right, that music, you know what that means? That music means it's closing time, which means you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. For Parrot Heads Everywhere, for Connor Rogers and Jay Croucher, I'm merely Matthew Berry. We will see you back here tomorrow. Peace out. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotorWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.